everyone, with fall officially here, I thought it would be a good time to go through my eyeshadow palettes and pull out some of my all-time favorite fall themed, fall toned eyeshadow palettes. Now, some of these are still current, some of these are old favorites that may or may not still be available, but I realized that if you are watching this, you are a makeup fan like me, and you probably have a pretty extensive collection as well. So some of these may already be in your collection, and if they're not, there are still a few available if you're interested. Now, there's no rule on this is a spring tone and this is a winter tone, but we definitely think of certain colors when we think of fall, and by we I mean me in this case. So this is purely subjective, there are no rules, but I tend to think of palettes that have the colors that reflect changing leaves. Now, I live somewhere where the leaves do not change. I am talking to you from San Antonio, Texas, but we're all familiar with what those golds and coppery, rusted, red tone, beautiful leaf colors look like. I've seen pictures. I grew up in Chicago. I remember what it looked like. And I have to admit, if you are unfamiliar with me, by the way, hi, my name is Marnie, and I'm a big fan of neutral toned eyeshadow palettes. So most of my palettes could definitely fall into this category, but there are some standouts. Now, I have broken them up into two different categories, drugstore and higher end, and the only real difference between those two categories is the price. The quality of all of these shadows is incredible, and in many of the cases, the drugstore quality is as good as or better than some of the high-end palettes that I have to share with you. So the first palette I have to show you is the smallest palette. There's really no order to this, but this was at the top of the pile, and this is one of the e.l.f. bite-sized quads. Now, there are quite a few in this collection that could qualify as autumnal, but this one I picked out because it's a little more unique. Most of the other palettes that I have are more of the russet and the rusts and the coppery tones. This one is obviously very much a berry toned palette, especially because it is called Berry Bad, but there still are those russet, rusty shades in here. Namely, this one right here is a gorgeous lid shade. You could definitely use it on your outer corner as well, but how pretty is that tone? See that reflection? I am definitely a sucker for the shimmer shades, and those are mostly what I'm going to be swatching here, but there are two matte shades in this palette, two shimmer tones as well. I don't know that I would say this is a standalone palette, but you can get quite a few looks with this. If you throw in maybe an ivory brow bone shade and use your bronzer as a crease shade, you can really get quite a few looks with this little guy. And the quality and pigmentation of these shadows are comparable to anything I have in my collection. This next one is definitely discontinued, and it breaks my heart. I don't get too attached to makeup. We all know your favorites are gonna get discontinued, but when Milani pulled these off the shelves, it made me sad because this was my most reached for palette pretty much year round. Over almost anything else I had in my collection, the quality of these shadows is incredible. This is the Bold Obsessions palette. There were 4 palettes in this collection, and I love 3 out of the 4. There was also a Soft and Sultry and a Most Loved Mattes, as well as a Pure Passion, which was all berries and reds. But this one, especially that center column, I mean, that just screams fall leaf colors right there. But so many of these shades are great for autumn looks. I would say that this one was this column I used as basically just a quad. Very neutral, a little bit cool toned, but I would often warm up the crease with this shade right here from the middle column. This looks like a very boring, basic taupe, but I still think it is possibly the best neutral, pure taupe shade I've ever seen. Love that as a lid shade. It's just such a wearable palette. I obviously still have this in my collection, and while I try to declutter the collection and take out the stuff that's no longer available, it's gonna be a while before I'm willing to give this one up. This next palette from L'Oreal is the Paradise Enchanted palette, and at first glance it looks very light toned, even there's some pastels in here, but particularly this column right here, there are some beautiful rusty coppery shades. This last column right here is such a beautiful kind of fall toned look. And then even in this middle column, those two deeper colors. They're very wearable, and the quality of these shadows, I'm just gonna barely tap that most deepest color shade. These are the creamiest of all, I'd say, the shadows that I have to share with you today. That's a beautiful deep tone, great in the outer corner. You could use it as a liner. I have been told that this is discontinued, but I still see it in a lot of drugstores. So if you don't have this yet and you see it, I would say grab it because it will be disappearing for sure. It was part of their scented eyeshadow collection, and even though this is a few years old, it still definitely has a scent. I can't smell it from here, but if I stick my nose right in it, so it's not an offensive scent unless you literally bury your face in it, so don't let that scent put you off. But these are so creamy, and yeah, if you want some bright pops of color, you have it over here, but the center two columns definitely very neutral to warm tone, and even these top two shades here. So the only two that are a little bit trickier to work with are these two more pink shades. But overall, gorgeous palette. If you've been watching me for any length of time, then you know I love Perfusion eyeshadow palettes. I'm a big fan of their 8-pan palettes. The 8-pan palettes are all basically the same color with different variations. So there's a all berry toned one, all red tones, greens, and so forth. This one I think is beautiful for, well, all the time, but especially for fall. It's their mauves or mauves, depends on where you live. That will change, but as you can see, lots of beautiful berry tones, some really deep red mattes over here. There is one just straight up kind of brown that I always put in my crease. It definitely balances out the eye. I love that the mattes do not streak, they're not patchy, but the shimmer shades are really creamy and soft. This one, look how bright that is. I mean, it's almost looks like it's a liquid eyeshadow. It has so much reflex on that. Anyway, these are also incredibly budget friendly. I believe they're under $5 for all 8 shadows. So if the mauves or mauves are not your thing, definitely check out the other color options in their 8-pan palettes. I also wanted to bring up this one. This is a, gosh, I don't even know how many, 35 shade palette. This is the Minimalist palette from Perfusion. Not particularly minimalist though, with all of these colors. And there's a lot of neutrals and just general everyday wear. But there's also, again, a lot of those coppery tones and plum shades, especially around the perimeter, a lot of the berry in the middle. There are these beautiful glitter shades. Now they feel rough to the touch. The key in application is to press in with your finger and then press on your lid. Don't swipe it or you'll get fallout. If you just gently tap, you can use the glitter as more of a topper, but if you really get it on your finger, let me demonstrate for you. I am going to share with you this beautiful goldish green, which I think is really a beautiful fall shade. So you just load it up on your finger. Look at that. And it's really pigmented. And so if you just tap it, you're gonna get some fallout. But if you tap it, you get a really nice concentrated look. And then if you just tap lightly, you'll just get that sprinkling of glitter right there. See, it's just barely there across the top. So you can layer it over like a similar shade just to get a little bit of sparkle to it. I find that with any glitter shade, that is the best way to apply. Use your finger, press firmly on the lid to get the maximum payoff. Let me swatch one more. Let's do this one that's very wearable. These remind me a lot of the Tati glitter ones. That one has a little more shimmer than glitter to it. And then this purple one, I'm dying to show you. The purple isn't necessarily something that I think of for fall. I think of this as more as a winter tone, but look how beautiful that is. And again, pressed in, but just tapped, it gives you more of a topper effect. And then the last drugstore or more budget-friendly palette that I want to share with you is not one that I've reached for as much as I should be, and I'm going to rectify that this fall. It is on the drugstore side of Ulta, so I'm going to include it. It is from Juvia's Place, and it's the Nubian Palette. And inside, this has a lot of similar tones to many of the other palettes I just shared with you, except for that gorgeous orange on the bottom. We haven't really seen that yet in any of the palettes. What I like about the Juvia's Place palettes, the colors are so pigmented, such great payoff, but not just the shimmers, the mattes as well. They're not patchy. They feel as creamy as the shimmers, and they swatch just as beautifully. I mean, that is very unusual for matte tones to swatch like a shimmer. They're not patchy, they don't skip across my hand. Great payoff. I would say that across the brand, I probably have 3 or 4 Juvia's Place palettes that across the brand, you have a similar quality of eyeshadow. They all have that beautiful creaminess to them, whether they're mattes or shimmers. And I just have not explored this as much because I was always put off a little bit by how pigmented they are because I'm so fair skinned, they really show up. But I've been playing with some color just a little bit more and I'm a little more comfortable using, especially, look at this beautiful color. Oh, this feels like liquid. It's like a cream. Look at how pigmented that is for such a pale shade. It's so pretty. They do such a good job. Look at that, isn't that gorgeous? Beautiful. Let's move over to the higher end side of the budget. And this first one, it's all about, I mean, get past the packaging. The packaging itself is limited edition. I'm fairly certain that the shadows inside are still available. This is the Charlotte Tilbury Bejeweled Eyes to Mesmerize. I think the just regular packaging Eyes to Mesmerize is still available, but inside every single one of these shades just screams fall. Now these are meant to be worn as trios. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 individual little sets here. Obviously there are no rules in makeup and you, of course, I always do mix and match. You can use some shades from one and then another, and then you might even want to pull in some shades from another palette because there are very few mattes. This is almost 100% shimmer. I would say that the 2 on the end are the most autumnal, if you want to say. You have Happy Glow over here, which is a little bit lighter. Then you have Seduce Glow over here, which is a little more neutral, but you're starting to see copper. And then you can add like that red and that plum tone and really get more of a fall themed eye. I will say, even though that these appear to be neutral, the Charlotte Tilbury shadows on me pull always warmer than they appear in the pan, which is why I included this in the fall eyeshadow palette collection. Next, I'm including this just because, I mean, gingerbread. So this is from Too Faced. I believe this was limited edition. It's the Too Faced Gingerbread Extra Spicy. The original gingerbread palette I passed on because honestly it was so full of pastels that to me it just looked like a springtime palette, and I don't usually wear a lot of candy colored pastel color eyeshadows, but this one has a few but not a lot. And even the color shades in here are more jewel toned, which are definitely more appropriate for fall. You can see all of those rusts and golds and browns. There are some odd pops of pink that I will admit I probably will never use. You can tell they've never even been swatched, but there are enough of these other more rusty, coppery gold shades that I feel like are very much fall and had to be included in this roundup. I have quite a few of the Anastasia Beverly Hills eyeshadow palettes, and many of them run very warm tone with all of the shades I've been talking about. There are 3 that I could easily include: the Sultry, Soft Glam, and the Modern Renaissance. But of those 3, I would say that Modern Renaissance to me is the most fall-like. This is an older palette, but it's still available. I just did a video, I believe, doing a tutorial with some of these colors, so I will link that on the eye and down in the description box. But there are so many beautiful shades, and what I like about this one is there are a lot more orangey, mustardy shades in here. Most of the other palettes you've been seeing more copper, more russet, more berry, and there are berry on this side of the palette, but then you have all these over here that'll give you a lighter, less impactful eye, but still very fall-like. I just, obviously you can wear these all year round, but I always pull out my Modern Renaissance palette this time of year. If you want to play with a little bit of color and you want something that's a departure from the typical bronzes and coppers and all the shades that I've been sharing with you, this is a newer one from NARS that I've also talked about. This is limited edition. It is the Climax palette. And yes, it has that beautiful burgundy at the top there, and the bottom row is pretty neutral, but the olive tone matte in the corner and the olive shimmer in the middle are very autumnal and very wearable, because even though they look green in the pan, when you swatch them, both of them, they pull a little more neutral green, almost brown. Here's the shimmer. When you swatch it, see how it almost has a gold brown reflect to it, so not so bright green. And then the matte green definitely swatches like a muddy green olive brown. So not a bright green, I feel like a very wearable green, especially if you layer it with some of these warmer tones up here. So this I feel like is a very wearable, mostly neutral palette. It's just a little bit different than everything else I've shared with you. So if you have all of this and you wanted to maybe supplement with something new, this is the palette that I would recommend. And then the last palette that I wanted to share is what is on my eyes today. And I've had this for a little while as well. This is from Dominique and it's the Latte Palette. There is a Latte 2 that I still haven't picked up. It has these very bright pastels in it that, again, I'm not a big fan of pastels on my eyes. I'm already pretty pale. We don't need to emphasize that, but I love this. I mean, look at these shades. First of all, the names alone say fall. The top row is hazelnut, caramel, vanilla cream, mocha, and pumpkin spice. And then these three shimmers on the bottom are espresso, macchiato, and creme brulee. And then you have cold brew and double shot on the bottom. And even though these are two very bright pops of color, they're jewel tone. And that to me is still very much in the fall color scheme. I love these shades. I'm wearing pretty much all of them in my eye. I've just blended them out and layered them. So they blend together really well. I love this yellow toned shade as a brow bone highlight and just to lay it down in the crease as a transition. And I'm a big fan of caramel in the crease. And then I like to kind of warm it up a little bit with pumpkin spice is what I have on. I think you can see a little bit of that orange peeking through. But these shimmers are stunning. They're almost metallic. They just feel and go on like cream, but they are powders. I'll admit, I rarely dip into these two, although today it's very subtle. I have on the plum, which is called Double Shot, just really subtly on my lower lash line. I could have probably gone on for another 30 minutes with another 10 or 15 palettes in my collection, but these are the ones that jump to the front when I'm thinking about fall. I would love to do a tutorial featuring one of these with my new set of brushes that I just got today. Hang on, let me share them with you. These just came in the mail today. These are the new brushes from BK Beauty, done in collaboration with Angie Hot and Flashy. They're a set of 7 brushes that Angie designed specifically for women with more mature eyes or hooded eyes, and I cannot wait to unwrap them. I pretty much only use BK Beauty brushes anyway, so I know these are going to be amazing. So if you're still watching this, down in the description box, since you're the diehard ones that sat through this whole video, let me know which of these palettes you would like me to use in a tutorial featuring these brushes. These are available to order. I do have a discount code. It's just Marnie10. It'll get you 10% off. So let me know down in the comments which of those palettes you would like to see featured in a tutorial next week or this week. Let's make it this week and I will be happy to oblige you. Thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I cannot wait to read your comments and see which palette is your favorite. Until then, I hope you are doing well. Thanks for hanging out and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.